It looks like we're gathering people now, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining the team here at Equalum and at Primenet. We're so thrilled that you could join us today. I am going to introduce our team, but if you don't mind starting the slides, Dabir, that'd be great. My name is Caroline Mayer. I am the VP of Marketing here at Equalum. We're thrilled to welcome everyone to our Solution Spotlight, Strategic Foundations for a Modern Cloud-First Approach. We'll go to the next one. We are joined today by Tony Smith of Primenet. He's their commercial director. Dabier Mia, who is from Equalum, represents sales in EMEA, and John Landels, who's our sales engineer for the EMEA region as well. As you have questions today, we hope and encourage this to be a live discussion. So we would love to hear your thoughts, perspectives. We have a few polls that we'll be putting in here as well. Please do contribute those thoughts in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, or you're welcome to put them into the chat as well. But the more discussion, the better. That's how we like to do it here. So Dabier, I will pass it to you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So, to give a bit of a backdrop into this, we all know that cloud is no longer some future aspirations for most businesses. The cloud is real and already a big deal, and it's only going to keep growing for the foreseeable future. I've read some stats recently, and what I was shocked to hear was that it's estimated that public cloud spend is expected to reach $623 billion by 2023, and that's only next year. Now, on average, organizations are leveraging 5 different cloud platforms. And it's also estimated by 2025, the data stored in the cloud data centers will exceed 100 zettabytes, and that's absolutely phenomenal. 92% of organizations have built a multi-cloud strategy in place, or certainly well underway. And with cloud adoption having reached 92%, the real big question now is, we're in the cloud, so now what? How do we optimize and utilize this vast amount of data to benefit our organizations, create compelling differentiators, and of course, ultimately provide value and benefits to our customers?
We'll just quickly do a poll because we wanted to get a sense of what everyone is experiencing themselves with their cloud strategy. So you'll see on your screen a quick poll that asks, are you a single cloud, cloud first, business right now? Do you have a multi-cloud strategy in place, hybrid cloud? Are you moving to a cloud first approach, or maybe you're still on-prem? We're interested in your answers here in the group because it helps us get a sense of what it is that real customers, real businesses are experiencing versus just the Gartner reports. We're getting close with some participation. We've got about 38%. So it looks like most people so far in the group, multi-cloud strategy in place. Very interesting. We've got an on-prem, we do have a cloud first approach, a little hybrid cloud, but the bulk is that 50% of multi-cloud strategies in place. Very interesting. So you are at the right spot. Dabier, all you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a look at a couple of use cases with some of the customers that we've been selling into. So for our use case, we have a utility wholesale company, and they provide services such as phone services, electricity services, and lots of other utilities to predominantly small and medium-sized businesses. For their CRM, they use Salesforce rather, and what they wanted to be able to do was to capture quote information from lots and lots of different disparate back-end systems all in real time. So what they needed to be able to do was, when their users were in Salesforce and they were working on these different quotes, they wanted to be able to make a call out to all of these different systems. Before they looked into real time and automation, they were doing lots of this with homegrown, what I describe as hand-built systems, things like Excel spreadsheets, or having to manually go out into third-party systems and do manual lookups. They didn't have any sort of real-time processing available, and certainly nothing by way of real time. What this did was that it gave them quite a few challenges to actually do all of this manually. It took up a lot of time, energy, and resources, as you could probably imagine. And in this particular use case, this company was looking for something that would automate all of that so that the sales team could just stay in their CRM, in Salesforce, and everything would be fully automated in the background, freeing up, people and expensive resources to focus on other high value tasks. Tony, over to you.
The classic, got myself on mute. So first mistake of the day. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I just briefly want to talk about some of the challenges faced in public transport, and how through Primenet and Equalum we can help transport operators address some of those challenges. So if you think about us as a society now, we operate in this instant on information hungry environment, which is difficult for public transport operators. And let me expand a little why it's difficult. If you think about a public transport operator, they're probably running buses, trams, maybe local railways. Then they're being pressured to offer new innovative services such as transport on demand. So that's where you can request public transport to pick you up from a specific place, very much mirroring the taxi kind of model. That's really starting to proliferate around Europe. And then we've got micro-transit. So that's push bikes and scooter hire. If you lay on top of that, the challenges that an organisation's got, it's got a CRM system where it keeps all its regular rider information. It's got a fare engine where all the fares are calculated. You've got telemetrics from stops and vehicles. You've got a payments engine where the fares are collected and then have to be settled and transacted. And new payment methodologies coming along all the time, such as contactless, so tap and go, mobile payments, prepaid, flexible tickets as well now. So you've got a whole heap of demand on the transport organisations. And the big challenge in transport is that their infrastructure has typically been built up over time. The average running time for a ticketing engine, a fare calculation engine, is sort of 10 to 15 years. And some of these tend to be bespoke developments with bespoke APIs. And if anyone who's worked in the IT industry for as long as me know that you get some great developers in for an application, then they move on and you're left with this kind of static API, which is very hard to manage. So what the operators need to do is pull all that information in from very, very disparate feeds into one environment where they can then analyze that data. And what they do with that data is then they're able to make informed decisions in real time, as well as plan their operations moving forward. So what do I mean by decision-making in real time? So if you're operating a train and it's really busy, you might want to offer people the opportunity to say, actually, you're booked on the 9 o'clock. It might be better for you to take the 9:30 and here's a £5 incentive to spend somewhere else, just so you can balance the customers out. Likewise, you could have a very empty train, still cost you as much to run it. How do you attract people on it? So you can push out real-time promotions. And then you've got that interaction with the customer. So there's all this massive business need to pull all these information sources together to be able to push out information to your riders and public transport users. So that's where Equalum comes along. Equalum comes along, and we're able to build a vehicle to pull all those data feeds together in a simple, unintrusive manner, which enables that data to be pulled up into a central repository and then used to make business decisions. So it's quite a real world challenge. It's the changing in society that's making it do it, pushing public transports into becoming real digital businesses. And the power of the analytics that they can access through pulling all those data feeds together is really important. So Dabir, back to you for the next use case.
Tony, thank you very much. Thank you. So due to NDAs, we haven't been able to name some of these companies, but for this third use case, what I can say is that this is a customer that we worked with, is a global big pharma company that's developing vaccines and prescription drugs and consolidating real world data all in real time. They had been trying to manage clinical trials on a global level. They had real world data coming in globally for patients. You know, they had clinical trial data, they had vaccination data in this race to develop the COVID vaccine. And they were trying to successfully integrate all of that in real time, and then be able to apply things like AI and BI and eliminate all of those data silos that they had with various research facilities and pods. But you know, a stumbling block for them was that their data was housed, you know, both on-prem and in the cloud. And to, you know, complicate things further, they were using another provider that just did not have either the capability or the power that they needed for real time. They also lack the technical resources in-house, even though they're a big global company, and the technical team was getting overwhelmed by the broken pipelines and all of these things not working and operating correctly. In addition to that, they were struggling with a lot of custom integrations, a lot of complex, a lot of complicated integration to try and make all of these pipelines work. And then they also had to maintain some level of security, because at the end of the day, they're dealing with, you know, kind of critical healthcare data. Ultimately, what I would say, the biggest benefit they perceived, you know, for this, or biggest benefit perceived for this big pharma, was that Equalum was able to consolidate all of the different data use cases under one unified platform. So, you know, really our core USP and the thing that made them come to us, because we're able to offer them batch and streaming in real time and replication and change data capture all under that one unified platform. They had one place essentially to, you know, to look at, you know, to build pipelines, one place to be able to execute, essentially a single source of truth. And what this led to them, you know, was for them to be able to drive significant time savings for them, you know, for their team, and the ability for them to look at stuff in real time. Yep. So hope that gives you a bit of a context and flavor into some of the use cases for some of our, you know, customers. And this slide, what I'm going to do is just to talk, you know, a little bit about the data architecture. And what we've seen is that organizations and enterprises, you know, have invested heavily in new sources of data, you know, new types of data, new cloud solutions to manage that data. And as I mentioned earlier with that big pharma, and to be able to use cutting edge technologies like AI and BI tools to be able to get business value out of that data. However, one of the key challenges is that they're finding the tools that they traditionally used for the data integration can't handle all of that integration that they need for these modern technologies. The pipelines, the most important part that is moving data from one source to the target in a fast and efficient way, has not seen either the same level of investment or retention as the actual data sources and target themselves. So in a modern enterprise, you know, what we've got is lots of different sources of data and lots of different targets of data. And we're particularly talking about these new solutions around, you know, data science, BI and event hubs, feeding applications. And if we think about what we already have, you know, probably a traditional tool that, you know, we acquired 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago in place that we've been using for doing, you know, things like batch ETL. That's already, you know, maybe integrated into some of our solutions, but then we want to add things like streaming and CDC, and we want to integrate all of that. And we're looking at buying additional tools to do that, simply because our old tool doesn't do it. So we need a separate tool for streaming. We need a separate tool for CDC. And then we realized that we also need a different tool now for doing some, you know, things like streaming ELT. So we end up with all of these 4 different tools, and we can see, you know, we've ended up with quite a lot of complex set of integrations. And once we reach that point, we then realize that no, not all of our systems are supported, and also maybe, you know, once guarantee isn't, you know, in place. And what all of this leads to, you know, with the data that we've got on our hand is, you know, you have, you know, incomplete data, you know, you've got inconsistent data, and you've got, you know, stale data. And if we then combine all of that and take all of this together, we've got a number of different, you know, challenges around accessing not only that legacy data, but particularly that modern data, the data that's coming to us in real time. it's coming to us in lots of different types and lots of different formats. And eventually we're ending up with these silos because of the traditional tools that leads to vulnerable data pipelines. And ultimately what it's leading to is, IT organizations not meeting SLAs in terms of delivering that key business, that critical business information that they need to become a business differentiator for them.
Thanks, Navir. Let's look at some of the core challenges which are stopping these projects from taking flight or delaying them. What we do see is that a lot of organisations run into roadblocks along the way, and I think one of the real stumbling blocks is the lack of results that people come across. So internally, have they got the right resources to deliver these projects? We know there's an IT skills gap at the moment, which is putting more and more pressure on. So do we have the right skill sets to do the integrations, the people to enable us to manipulate the data in the way we want to do it? And then there's the consistent challenge that we all face in the IT industry of increasing operational costs. So how do we get more for less? How do we protect that investment in the legacy infrastructure whilst digitizing our businesses? So there's a big challenge for our organizations there. And then thirdly, I think the most reasons we see people stop from taking this kind of project on is the cost of change. So what does it actually mean to implement, manage, and deliver the project? The actual overheads of doing a project like this, not just the cost of the resources, the impact on the business, retraining, reskilling, etc. So they're some of the key challenges that we see along the way. And we'll hopefully demonstrate, as we move into a demonstration a bit later on in the presentation, we can demonstrate how the simplicity of the Equalum tool, together with Primenet skills, can help give the impetus back to organisations to get these projects underway.
So before we move forward, we're interested to see again with you in the audience, as you look at some of those challenges that you see on the screen, what feels familiar to you? What's the biggest obstacle to your success? We hear it all the time, both at Primenet and at Equalum, what people are struggling with most, but we're interested to hear from the group as well. Insufficient real-time processing, interesting, that's leading the charge, but cost of change is too high. Well, all of it, really. It looks like, nope, we're back up. Insufficient real-time processing is top and in parallel with cost of change being too high. Very interesting. And then lack of technical resources. Of course, we're facing a huge skills gap globally that's coming down the pike. So we've got to prepare for that as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Caroline, for that. Tony was kind enough to mention some of the combined values that we bring to our customers. Now, on Equalum's side, some of the core values, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to mention some of the most important ones. Our no-code UI, together with the drag and drop flows canvas, allows customers to construct complex data workflows without writing a single line of code. And what this means is that you're able to adopt our tool and derive value from it rapidly. What you don't need is expensive custom technical resources, developers that you need with some of the other tools that you might find in the marketplace. And together with the open source platform engine, it gives customers a best-in-class performance with rich, powerful features and lots of flexibility. And as far as I know, it is the only solution in the marketplace that natively supports all of the data integration use cases. And I'm talking about real time, I'm talking about batch, I'm talking about streaming, I'm talking about replication, and so much more under one unified platform that gives enterprise, performance.
Thanks, and just to give a Primenet flavour to the argument. We believe that Equalum is an industry-leading product set, and coupled with our skills inside the IT industry and our experts, we believe that we can enable organisations to not only grasp the thorny end of the nettle around these projects, but actually deliver them on time and on budget. And at Primenet, our whole ethos is about doing what's right for your business and not what makes most money for Primenet. So we really like to get embedded with the organisation, understand what you're trying to achieve, help you mitigate those risks, and working together with great partners like Equalum deliver the right solution to come across your business, for you to achieve your business goals and objectives. And I think that's probably enough talk about what we can do and why people are looking at the technologies that we bring to the market. And it's probably time for John to give us a demonstration on the project, on the platform.
And in terms of just one other point that I would like to make there in terms of that demo, for customers, I say customers, for all of you good folk who are on the call that are thinking, well, how do we engage? How do we, open up the conversation? I think, it's very, very easy. Tony's there, from Primenet. I'm here from Equalum. And moving forward, so you're going to get a very high level overview of the solution from John. But if anybody, were thinking about specific use cases, specific to your organizations, we can very rapidly do a custom demo with your specific use cases. So you can see the value very, very rapidly. And that's something that, we can touch base on later or answer any questions later on. But for now, as Tony quite rightly said, it's shum from us and over to John to do the demo. John, over to you.
So we're looking here at the Equalum dashboard. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today going into every single part of it, but I would like to show you a few different use cases that really gives you a feel for the platform and tells you a little bit about why Equalum's different. First thing I'd like to cover is what we call replication groups. The idea of a replication group is, let's say you have something like an Oracle application database, and you want to start running reports against that data, but you don't necessarily want to start doing lots and lots of BI against your application database because of the potential for the additional load on that database. So you want to replicate that data somewhere else. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm assuming here that we're going to go from Oracle to Postgres. If we have a look at how this has been built so far, you can see that I've selected my Oracle source. You can see that I've selected a Postgres target and specifically a database and schema within that. If we have a look here, I've already selected some of the tables. This is already configured, it's already running. But if I wanted to add more, I can very easily come in here. I can specify various different schemas. I can specify a pattern for the table name. And I can say, show me any tables that match. And I've now got two additional tables in here. I'm still going to adjust this. I'm going to get rid of that one, leaving me with one new table. I can go through here. I could customize this. Okay, so one of the things that I would usually do when I'm doing this kind of operation is I would configure end-to-end schema evolution. And you can set this as a default, but I haven't got it as a default on my system at the moment. This is just a demo platform. What end-to-end schema evolution does is it says, if your source database changes, okay, if the data definitions change, we'll automatically reflect that in the target. And in this kind of replication scenario, that's what we want. If we have a customer database and we add a field which might be alternate email address, we want that field to immediately appear in our target. We want to immediately start synchronizing that data. That might not be the case if you're building your flows by hand and you're doing lots of additional processing, enriching the data. Okay, you might be using fields for grouping or for sorting or filtering. And if you change your field, that field might not exist anymore. So this evolve stream option would allow you in those circumstances to simply receive a notification to say, hey, something's changed. Here's a draft of what we think you actually want it to be now, but you have to manually publish that draft. In the meantime, we'll simply cache the changes. So You're not going to lose the data. But for for replication, we want the end-to-end schema evolution. Okay. If I was to apply this, it would immediately start synchronizing for me. And what it actually does behind the scenes, it does it in a number of phases. The first thing is we do an initial capture read. So we're looking at that source and we're reading all of the historical data that's in there. Once we start doing that, we're able to create that target table and start populating it. So we have this initial capture right. So that historical data is immediately being moved across so that we can start running reports, we can start making business decisions, whatever we need to do. And we start caching the changes. Obviously, we don't push those changes until we've done the initial capture right. But as you can see, very quickly, we can get to this point where we can be synchronizing that data across. And this is useful in a number of situations. So first of all, as I mentioned, if you have an application database and you want to replicate the data to an analytics database or a data warehouse, something like that, that's one use case. What if you have an application that you're migrating to the cloud? So you've got it on-premise at the moment. Let's say it's running SQL Server on-premise. You want to move it to Azure and you want to run it under Azure SQL Server. We could do that migration of the data, but because the replication stays in place and we're synchronizing that data at all times, you have an opportunity to effectively run it in parallel to keep some people on the old system, move beta testers maybe across to the new system, but you're still keeping all of that data from those original people so that until you finally make that switch over to the cloud, your data is still being fed through and still in sync. The second use case that I want to talk about is actually something that's a little bit more traditional. You may have had tools in the past that did batch ETL for you. And there's still a place for batch ETL, even in a modern hybrid landscape. But you don't necessarily want to have sort of 3 or 4 different tools doing all of these different jobs for you. So we still allow you to manually build batch ETL jobs. We have one here where, if we have a look, I'm taking airport data. So this is details of airports, which includes here an airport code. And you can see some of these fields are null. I want to assume that if I push this all the way through to Snowflake, if there's any fields that are null, it's going to cause a problem in whatever I'm using that data for at the other end. Okay, so we want to mitigate this. First thing we need to do is to identify any row of data from the database that has a null in that column. And that's really easy to do. We simply have this split operator. We check if that field is null. And you can see if it is, we go to true. Otherwise, we go to not true. What this means is all of the data that we've got coming in here is only those records where that field is null. I can then very simply make some changes here. And for the purposes of the demo, we've kept it nice and simple. I'm simply writing in this city field. And to show you how easy it is to do that, if I double click city, there it is in my expression. So I'm doing that. I could do more with it. I could maybe do a substring. I could do a lookup to get this information from maybe another table somewhere. But whatever I do, once this is finished, the after situation here, you can see now my code is no longer null. Okay, that's how it was beforehand. That's after the transformation. Then I simply merge this data back together, and then it's ready to write out to Snowflake with none of these fields now being null. Okay, so this is a great situation where we would use a batch process rather than live streaming. We don't need this to be updated continually. We're not updating this effectively static metadata. We're not updating that on a regular basis. But maybe we want to run this once a week or once a month just to make sure everything's up to date. It's a perfect use case for batch. The final use case that I want to talk about is what we call streaming aggregation. So we're back to real time. In this case, we're bringing in an event stream of flight data. You can see that I have an ID, airline, an origin airport. You'll notice that this is JSON. We can very happily work with JSON or any sort of structured data in Equalum. We have a destination. We have how many stops the flight made and the price. I want to assume that what we actually want is not so much the individual flights, but a running total. How many were direct? How many were one stop? How many two stop? How many three stop? So what I'm doing here is I'm simply grouping all of my flights coming in by the number of stops. And I'm then aggregating this data and counting how many stops there were. That takes that constant stream of data and transforms it to this very simple set of data, which I'm here pushing out via Kafka. But this will be continually updated. So we'll have that streaming aggregation. At any point, I can look at this and I'll know the running total of how many flights were direct, for example. We can add windowing to this, so we can put a time window on here. So let's imagine this is sales data we're talking about. Maybe before we went to the cloud, before we went to a streaming solution, we had an end of month sales report that would run. So a batch ETL process that would collate all of that data and look at all of our totals. But imagine somebody on Instagram, an influencer on Instagram, had posted that they'd just found this great bargain, and suddenly there'd been a run on it. And within the first few days of the month, you were sold out. But you didn't know until the end of the month when you ran your batch ETL. With this, if I added windowing, I could get my running totals for the last hour. So I could see in the last hour, suddenly this particular product has spiked. So I can respond to that within an hour of it spiking, rather than at the start of the following month. So this is something that's hugely powerful. And it's one of the things that we believe is unique to Equalum. So that's a real quick overview of what we can do with Equalum. We went through 3 use cases there. We talked about replication, batch, streaming aggregation. It's really only scratching the surface. And as Dabir said, what's probably more useful is if this is something that's striking a bit of a chord with you, then get in touch and let us do a more focused, customized demo where we can talk specifically about your use cases.
Wonderful, John. Thank you so much.
Any questions at this point?
I did have a question come in the chat. Let me read this back to you. What kind of resources do we need to put into cloud migration using Equalum and Primenet? John,
I think
Tony, can you both?
Yeah, I think this is probably a better question for Tony. This is more people.
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's I guess it's the how long's a piece of string, but what the value will bring to the equation is that we'll have the expert resources who can help you implement and deploy Equalum. You're not going to need anyone who can write code because it's a no-code deployment. So all we need some people is understand your business process and what you want to achieve. That's critical, that we understand the end goal. So that enables us to configure the infrastructure to produce the right results for you. So it has a much, much lower impact on your resources than a traditional project. But until we get into specific examples, it's a little hard to say, you need 5 of these and 4 of those.
I guess the key is that you don't need the dedicated staff. This is something exactly. You don't need a Kafka specialist. You don't need a developer. Even once Primenet have done that migration for you, when you carry on working with Equalum, you're not needing real specialists. If you've got people who can work Microsoft Excel and understand how to put a formula into Excel, you can use Equalum really well once that foundation has been done.
I've got another one that's just come in asking, we are running Snowflake on AWS. Can Equalum help get data into Snowflake?
Yes, absolutely. So in general, we have sources, we have targets. Sources are pretty much any database. We can work with them at different levels. We can work with anything that's got a generic JDBC driver. We can work with REST APIs, flat files, streaming sources like Kafka. For the targets, Snowflake is one of the targets that we have particular focus on. So whether that's running in AWS or even in Azure or even Google Cloud, we can assist with getting the data in there. So as long as we can read that data from wherever it needs to be read, we can absolutely help you push that data into Snowflake.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm not seeing anything. Anybody else have any other questions? If you do, please add them to the chat or to the Q&A. But otherwise, Tony, Davier, anything else you want to add about the partnership that we have here with Equalum and Primenet?
I think from our perspective, we've seen this as a real game changer. Hence why we've put a lot of effort into building a robust partnership with Equalum. I think we can bring some really innovative services to the market that can enable organizations to expedite their transformation to a truly digital native cloud-based organization, and that's what excites me about it. I think we're gonna really be able to accelerate the pace of change for certain organizations.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to us at equalum.io or at Primenet UK. And we're so thrilled that you joined us. We hope you learned something and gathered some feedback, and enjoy this beautiful day. Thanks to our panelists.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.